Here's everything you need to know about what to eat when you're on a GLP-1 weight loss drug, plus what foods you should avoid. Hi everyone, welcome back to Clean Eating Kitchen. I'm Carrie and I am a certified holistic nutritionist, and I also have a master's degree in public health with a specialty in nutrition. And as I mentioned, today we're going to be covering clean eating and GLP-1 agonist weight loss drugs. So whether you're thinking about taking one of these weight loss drugs, or maybe you've just been prescribed one, this is going to cover what you should and should not eat, because really the nutrition is so important to the long-term success and for you feeling your best. If you're new here, I usually discuss topics of chronic illness and women's health, but I thought this topic was especially timely and useful, and I posted on social media and asked if you were interested, and a majority of people responded and said yes. So first of all, I'm going to give you an introduction to what these GLP-1 agonist drugs are. We'll talk about things like common side effects and how you can use nutrition to manage them. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the off-label uses of these drugs, including how they may positively affect chronic illnesses, including things like PCOS, chronic migraines, or even things like Parkinson's disease. It is really incredible and exciting. And then at the very end, I'll tell you about a special free download that I have that can help you if you're just getting started with clean eating and you're on a GLP-1. So I'm calling these drugs GLP-1s, and that's like the class of what they are. The brand names are probably names you've been hearing: Mounjaro, Wegovy, Ozempic, and Zepbound. And then at the time of recording of this video, there's actually compounded generic versions that you can get as well. They are prescription, and so you will have to be prescribed them by a doctor or a healthcare provider who's licensed to offer prescriptions. So these drugs were originally developed to help with patients who are suffering from type 2 diabetes, and now they are being prescribed. So the way that they work, they don't magically remove fat from your body or change the way your metabolism works. But what they do is they change how your body, or they alter how your body handles hunger, digestion, and blood sugar. And then of course, nutrition and exercise also plays a big role in how well these drugs work and how you're going to feel while you're taking them. And just a reminder, although I am a nutritionist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a licensed healthcare provider, so this is just meant for general education, and please always speak to your healthcare provider before making changes to your diet or supplement routine. Okay, so let's jump in to a few things to expect if you're getting ready to start a GLP-1 agonist. So just know that your appetite and possibly your digestion will change. And this means that once you start eating, you probably will still have an appetite to eat, but once you start eating, you're going to feel full a lot faster and you're going to stay full longer. And then also, this drug can make your digestion slow down a little bit, so the food may feel like it's sitting a little heavier in your stomach. And we're going to be talking about this because this is where I think making healthy and appropriate food choices can help mitigate any of the negative side effects. And speaking of side effects, there definitely are some common ones. I think up to 25% of patients starting will feel symptoms like nausea or bloating, and that is because the food is moving slower through your system. They call that the food motility. And because of that, patients may also experience some constipation. And then lastly, feeling some fatigue or dizziness may be one of the common side effects, and that can be a result of how the blood sugar might be changing a little bit while you're on this drug. So these medications likely will help with weight loss. That is the number one thing that they're being used for. But the long-term success of how that weight loss will stay off in a patient will depend on lifestyle and nutrition. So these medications will help with weight loss, but the long-term success really will depend on a patient's nutrition and other lifestyle changes like exercise. So you may have heard some stories about how patients will regain the weight once they go off the weight loss drug, but really that can be mitigated if you implement some lifestyle changes, as I mentioned. Okay, so let's just talk briefly about some of the research about how these GLP-1 agonists are being used for some of the chronic health conditions. So since the drugs were developed for patients with type 2 diabetes, pretty soon researchers and doctors were seeing that people who had related conditions like prediabetes, maybe even PCOS, insulin resistance, or metabolic syndrome were being successfully treated with these drugs as well. In other words, you don't necessarily have to be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes before you could potentially get some benefit from this drug. So beyond helping with diabetes and weight loss, researchers are also starting to see some benefits for conditions like PCOS, cardiovascular health, fatty liver disease, and neurological conditions, like I mentioned, and potentially could even slow conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. I will put some references in the description below. I think this is so exciting, especially as somebody who suffers from migraines. I think it is really interesting that a drug that was developed for something completely different could then be applied to another condition that is really debilitating. So in that way, I think we could think of these drugs as maybe a partner to go along with a clean, balanced diet. And by partnering those two things together, you can help stabilize your blood sugar, you can reduce inflammation, and support long-term health. So now let's talk a little bit more about specifically clean eating while you're on a GLP-1. So I really believe that clean eating is about being inclusive and flexible and adapting it to your needs. It really means choosing whole foods over the processed foods. And just by making simple changes like that, you can really change your health. I think some of the key principles and how to adapt clean eating if you're starting a GLP-1 or if you're already on a GLP-1, specifically, you really need to prioritize your lean protein sources. This includes foods like chicken, fish, eggs, tofu, if you want a non-animal based source of protein, Greek yogurt if you can tolerate dairy. And the reason is because you are going to be losing weight. Likely if you're on a high enough dose of this drug, you are going to be losing weight. And that means that you can start losing muscle. But if you're prioritizing your protein, then you're less likely to lose that muscle and you're going to preserve your lean body mass, which is so important as we get older. So that's number one, prioritize lean protein. So a lot of different practitioners have different ideas about how many grams of protein is needed each day, but a general good rule is to shoot for at least 100 grams as a woman, and then maybe higher, like 125 to 150 grams as a male, but it really is very dependent. You can look online for different types of protein calculators depending on your activity level and your age and your gender, things like that. But I think the idea is that you should try to have protein, maybe 25 to 30 grams minimum at each meal, so 3 meals a day, and then maybe some 1 or 2 snacks per day that also have protein. And that'll help get you to anywhere between 80 to 100 grams per day. As a woman, that's really like a good starting guideline for most women. Another thing you're definitely going to want to do when you're on a GLP-1 is increase or maintain a relatively high fiber intake. And that is going to help prevent that constipation, which is so common as the food moves slower through your digestive system. You don't want to get backed up. And so you can add vegetables, of course. And a lot of people don't know that berries, like especially raspberries, are very high in fiber and they're low in natural sugars. And so they're good for blood sugar stability. And of course, they have antioxidants. You can do whole grains if you tolerate grains, and also legumes. So like beans and lentils are really great sources of fiber. And so you definitely want to make that a priority, and you'll thank me later. The third principle of clean eating when you're on a GLP-1 is to choose healthy fats. So try to choose foods that don't have trans fats, which are found in packaged foods, and choose healthy real food sources of healthy fats like avocado, nuts and seeds, olive oil, fatty fish like salmon would be a great source, chia seeds. And these are really important because fats help you absorb the nutrients from your food. So obviously you don't want to do too high of a fat, too high fat intake in your diet, especially if the food's moving slower through your system. It's just going to feel like heavy and dense in your stomach. But if you add a little bit, like 1 to 2 tablespoons of a healthy fat per meal, then that is a good starting point as well. The fourth principle is you want to limit your ultra processed foods and your processed foods and added sugars. And so that means fried food, sugary drinks, refined carbs like breads, cookies, crackers. You want to minimize those. And to be honest, when you start this drug, your appetite will probably be fairly suppressed. And so those foods aren't even going to be as appealing as they once were. So if that sounds overwhelming to you and you haven't started this drug yet, then that's something you can look forward to. Your body will probably crave more of these healthy, unprocessed foods, and then you won't have the cravings as much. And that's actually something else I wanted to mention is there's some really interesting research happening about GLP-1s and some of the kind of addictive behaviors around alcohol and binge eating and things like that. And I think that's a topic that really needs to be explored a lot further. And there's going to be really interesting research coming out. Okay, the fifth principle of clean eating on a GLP-1 is to stay hydrated. And this is also really important to prevent the nausea that can occur quite frequently, especially on the day after you take this injection of the GLP-1. Because as of right now, the drugs are really administered through an injection. I've been seeing online that there's a patch that's coming out, but that's beside the point. You really do need to maintain your hydration, and that can be anything from water with electrolytes, herbal teas, bone broth is a really excellent way because then you're getting protein and hydration in one. And then the last principle that you just might want to remember is that it's okay to eat smaller, more frequent meals while you're on a GLP-1. This is going to help prevent the nausea and bloating and also make sure that you stay nourished. Okay, now I want to talk about some practical tips for eating when you're on a GLP-1 medication. And I also just want to tease that I do have a free download. I'm going to link it in the description. And it is a cheat sheet for clean eating meal prep when you're on a GLP-1, because you're probably going to be cooking a little bit more often or doing food preparation when you're trying to change your diet. And so I have some specialty tips about meal prepping, meal planning, and I will put the link to that in the description below so you can get that. It's totally free. So as I mentioned, you want to start with small, frequent meals. Now I know in the past you may have heard to try to limit meals if you were trying to lose weight, because that could be a strategy to help keep your blood sugar stable. But in this case, if you are in a GLP-1, of course, ask your doctor, but it seems to be that patients do better with small, frequent meals. So if you're used to maybe only eating twice a day, maybe you want to go 2 or 3 main meals and a snack. That would probably be easier for your stomach to handle the foods and to make sure that your blood sugar doesn't get too low. Another thing you might want to do is really practice some mindfulness. So when you're eating, try not to be on your phone, try to be present with your food. And this will help ensure that you don't overeat, because if you overeat, you are going to feel nauseous and bloated, and that's what we're trying to avoid. As I mentioned, we want to keep protein a priority. That's going to help prevent that muscle loss as you're losing weight, and it also is going to help keep your energy stable. Just remember protein. Of course, you can overdo it on protein, and if you have any issues like kidney disease, then please speak to your healthcare provider. If you're feeling nauseated, like maybe on the day after your injection, plan for that and prep for that. So maybe have soups or smoothies, maybe like a fruit and vegetable juice, soft vegetables, whole grains, like maybe cooked oatmeal with a little bit of banana or berries, things that are easy to digest and aren't too fibrous, just until the nausea goes away. And again, I really want you to plan ahead and have food prepped and ready to go. That is where my meal prepping cheat sheet will come in handy. Also, you want to think about your alcohol and sugary drink intake. I have a feeling when you start on a GLP-1, you will have fewer cravings for alcohol and sugary drinks. But just be mindful about that. Those foods can mess with your blood sugar as well, and they probably just aren't the most nourishing while you're trying to lose weight and you're on a GLP-1 medication. So my final thoughts regarding GLP-1 drugs and a clean eating diet is I think the two can pair really well. If you are trying to lose weight, if you have been stuck and you just can't find any solutions, this could be a really great tool for you. But the injections are not necessarily like a long-term solution. They might be. Some people are finding success after they lose the weight. They stay on a very low dose or maybe a lower dose, or maybe they take the injection every other week. But it's not for everyone. There's an expense involved. And so if you start setting these healthy habits in place now, then you're more likely to find the long-term success, especially if you stop the medication. And then just a final reminder, it's really not just about losing weight, and it's not just about vanity or how you look. It's really about finding long-term health positive outcomes and preventing or helping resolve symptoms of chronic illness. And so I hope that you found this video helpful. Again, my free GLP-1 meal planning cheat sheet linked below with some easy meal ideas and some tips. I would love to hear your comments or questions. Please leave them below. And I'm going to also link to Costco paleo-friendly shopping guide, which would be very appropriate if you're getting started on a GLP-1. I'll link that video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.